Well, good evening to all those that are gathered in the worship center, and those are online. We are so glad you are with us this evening. I thought I'd take a little different trip today, different path. It's the fact next week we'll be into the book of Ruth. And as fact we get further and further in, I want to take another time of just walking you through some of the sites that are in Israel. And the thing, if we would all wish we could all take everybody and go, but considering what's going on right now, it's not a good time to take a journey into Israel. But the foundation of our faith and everything we read about takes place there. And so I want to just take us on a journey tonight, and the fact so you all have a little better idea of the things you would see, etc. For those in the worship center, we do have some, I brought back some pieces of archaeology, some pieces to show people, to let them see and touch and feel. But you're online, you won't be able to do that. So I'm going to begin a journey through here. We're not going to get all the way through. On Tuesday, we got up to the city of Jerusalem, as about as far as we can get. And another time I'll go through further, and we'll continue on from this onto this, and to take that. When I went in 2006, 2007. Spent about over 5 weeks there in Israel, then in Jordan working on an archaeological dig. And the fact, on that trip, you learned a lot. We arrived and came and stayed at Lake Tiberias, or the Sea of Galilee, as we commonly call it. And on the first day, we went up to the Mount of Beatitudes. It's on a hill, and it says northern Israel, on the plateau, is in the spot where Jesus believed had delivered his Sermon on the Mount. Now, the Sermon on the Mount is not just given just here. We believe that's one of the places he gave. On that hill, there's a natural spot. There's a rock formation. And when you see pictures of Jesus delivering the Sermon on the Mount, you will see him in that rock formation sitting there and sharing the message. It is a natural amphitheater space that's below him where he's speaking, and the fact that which allows him to speak and everybody to hear. So if 5,000, 4,000, 10,000 came, they would be able to hear him talk. They didn't have microphones back then and those things, so they used the formation of the land, the amphitheater type places to be able to share. So it's right on the Sea of Galilee, Lake Tiberias, and it overlooks across. You can see the Golan Heights. So, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. On the site, we see multiple signs of sharing those messages. And this is looking from that hill, looking down the Sea of Galilee, across over the Golan Heights. It wasn't the best season, and the fact that we can see it, this is up higher in the hill looking down across, so you can see the Golan Heights in the distance over there on that. Now, the site we went to, there is a church there, but it's built upon what we know as an evidence of an ancient church about the 4th century. If you know your church history, etc., when Constantine came into power and came into faith, the Christian faith, he was taking the power away from the Greek and Roman gods, the deities they had all been worshiping, etc. And this is in the 4th century, 300s. The late 300s is when we think of the 4th century. And his mother, Saint Sophia, would have gone into Israel and was searching for the sites where places took. She would talk to the locals, etc. And thereupon that they built a church. Well, the church that was built in the 4th century, a new church. That church was long gone, been removed after we think of the Great Crusades, etc. A lot of the churches were torn down, destroyed, etc. After all that, but the Church of the Beatitudes that is there now is a very beautiful building. You're going to see that next. So it was built in about 1938, according to the design of Antonio Barluzzi. It was partly financed by Benito Mussolini, but it's also financed by Heinrich Himmler. Was another person who helped pay for it. So we see here's the outside of seeing the outside of the entrance going in. We go into the church, and we see with the chapel, etc. And you can see just the beauty of what was been built there, et cetera, and sharing. So we could go and we went and visited and saw, and they had illuminated Bibles there, illuminated Bible from I think it was about the fifth century that was there, so you could see the different things that were on the crowns. There was a monastery or nunnery that was still there to today. So this is where the Mount of Beatitudes, it's right above the place where they think this is truly at, about 1937. And so that's one place that you would go and go visit and see. I mean, the most beautiful, hardest thing is just hard to show if in a picture of just landscape, the place where Jesus would have. But you got to remember, Jesus' ministry is around the Sea of Galilee, Lake Tiberias. So much of it takes place in this area from place to place. We went to another place there called Tabitha, and the fact it's outside of Capernaum. It's just beyond the riverbank. It was a lonely place by the seashore, is where we believe that Jesus many times withdrew. When he withdrew to go to pray, it would have been in this area. It's situated at the banks of the Sea of Galilee, Lake Tiberias. It's considered the place where Jesus fed the 5,000, and the miracle of the multiplication of loaves took place there. It's also the site where Jesus, in his resurrection, his fourth appearance, took place in this area. Well, on there's a church that's been built on that, and the church is built upon another 4th century church. But we go in and you begin to see the beauty of the architecture, etc. And you see that beautiful chandelier they have built above it. You see the altar there in the middle that is there. That is one of the most holy places, we think, of that. We were there with many other people coming and going, etc. And there under the altar, you see a rock. It's on that, and the mosaic floor around that is from about the 4th century. It's from the early church that was originally built there on the site in which they found that. They believe that on this rock is where Jesus broke the bread and fed the 5,000. It was an amazing place to be when you sit there and you're there with Christians from all over the world coming in and out. Coming from Spain and South America. They're coming from Africa. We had a group come from India. And I remember being there when they came in and watching them. They came in on their knees and crawled to the place where this is. I remember the pastor laying on his stomach, praying and touching, raising his hand up just to touch this most holy place. Of thinking that this is where Jesus fed the 5,000. I felt that throughout the trip when you're in there, and this is all the places that Jesus walked. Where all the places are still there. That the ground's the same, the rocks are the same. This is where Jesus was. We went from there on down to Capernaum, and it was a main trading village. And you've been hearing me talk about the Via Maris. The fact, the way by the sea, the trading routes. We need to understand the trading routes because this is how word got around. This is how the kingdom this is what the Israelites were first coming to try to take control of this. This is, if you control the trade routes, you monetarily control, you do all kinds of things on this because the traders are constantly coming through. Trading with the fishermen, they're there collecting fish, they're drying the fish, they're trading the fish for other wares, etc. The caravans are taking that dried fish onto other places, etc. Things are traded back and forth. If you were here in the worship center up on the altar space right now, I'm holding a rock that we found in the Hellenistic home that we dug in outside of Amman, Jordan. This rock is not a natural stone found in the area, and the same thing we found in Israel and around the Capernaum, etc., is the fact there are many things that were brought there by traders So people, either they had gone on a trading mission, etc., or they had traded something for, such as a beautiful rock or some piece of pottery, etc., that came from other parts of the world. So there, another 4th century, the White Synagogue, built upon the remains of the Synagogue of Jesus. And that's when we were able to go in that. You think about, you're there looking in to, this is the White Synagogue built upon the remains of the synagogue that was there when Jesus was. This is where Jesus went to teach. Architecturally, it's very similar to what was rebuilt upon. It's a little more elaborate. But you get an idea when you start looking at that. This is the architecture, etc. When you go and look, I mean, I watched The Chosen, other movies, etc. And it's always, we see Israel, or the time of Christ, to the time of what the archaeological sites look like today. At the time of Christ, they didn't look this way. The beauty of these buildings, etc., you would think the roofs were there, thatched or slated, whatever, how they covered those, etc. The roofs would have been fully intact, all the columns being placed. And the filigree, etc., on the stone would most likely have been painted. Paint was a very common thing to do, was paint to highlight, to bring color, etc. So we begin to see the beauty of what was there. And this is an area right below, underneath this synagogue, is the places where Jesus came and sat and talked and shared. And that. So it's beginning to see, as you go through and see the archaeological ruins that are there, you got to look beyond of what they look like today and imagine what they looked like in the time of Christ or earlier. Even the time of the Israelites, in the very beginning of the times, it is to understand that, we see things from our sight today, or the way we understand, or from the ruins we're looking at, but you really need to imagine the beauty of these buildings, etc., and the society that was all around. The tradesmen are coming through, and the caravans coming through, of all the different languages, etc., of trading from anywhere from Egypt and what is now Africa, all the way into Asia. So the trade goods are going back and forth. So we see within the synagogue and how big this space is. You would have come and stood, just like if you went to a Russian Orthodox service today. The fact that you stand, in some of the Greek Orthodox churches, you stand as you hear the message, except there are no seats, except there are some places, usually for those of the elderly. But averagely, we would all be standing there to listen and to hear the message shared by the teacher, etc. On the same, in Capernaum also, we see the house of Peter. And that was covered we think that's the home of Peter, and Jesus cured Peter's mother-in-law there. Is also thought to the house that Jesus lived in while he was in Capernaum. We always ask the question, did Jesus have a home? Well, if you go biblically, you'll find in the fact that Jesus did. He returned to his home in Capernaum. So we think this is where he returned back to. This is also the same house in which we think the paralytic was lowered down through the roof into there. Well, on that site today, you can see the ruins of other homes that are there all surrounded. And you see this large chapel that's built up atop, overlooking down below it, looking down into the house of Peter. So it gives you, that's been preserved, protected, etc., so people can see this is where Jesus and Peter would have met. Jesus would have slept. Peter's mother-in-law, etc. So you can see within this space, there we walk among the viewing area, etc. They would also have services in that same space. You could have, and then you could look down in below. We see the other things, but this is what you're looking down into and seeing the home of Peter down below. On the same side, when we get into, we're there on it. You're on it in Capernaum. It's an ancient city. It's the time, being from that time, the time of Christ and earlier. There are many archaeological pieces throughout, and you see down there. You see bread mortars that are down at the bottom, on here. The fact that this is the grinding stones where you ground. I have a piece of one here. The fact to show you the rocks that you use and that you ground the wheat, etc., into that. So we see the remains of the houses around the synagogue, etc. And you see here's mortar. These are the pedestals, mortars and pestles that you use to grind, etc., to separate the wheat from the chaff, to set up, to grind and to make your bread, etc. That we throughout the sites and all the sites we go to, we will see olive presses everywhere. Every town has an olive press, sometimes more. The fact that where the olive orchards are, and the fact they bring that and they collect and create the olive oil, which you use for cooking, but you also use to burn in your lamps. It's a very clean burning oil, and the fact it's smokeless, and the fact that you would use that with the little. Many times in Vacation Bible School, we have the little lamps that are very similar to what the time they used, that you would put the olive oil in, the little wick on it, and it would burn, and that would provide the light in the evening. And there is the Greek Orthodox Church is there in the Capernaum. It's a beautiful facility that you see. Within there, it gives you an idea. And you see all the iconography that's within the Orthodox Church, and that's very common. And the fact, if you've been to a Greek Orthodox church, a Retro Orthodox church, if you go down to Newport News, you go over to Williamsburg, there are Greek Orthodox churches, and the iconography that is painted in there, painting the apostles, etc., and all the different acts of that is a way for them to share the message for of the story of the Bible. It's not there for them to worship. They do not worship it. They use it as a way of sharing and educating and teaching. So we can see that was here. You see what's up there. They're telling the stories. Different stories are being told in these different images. And the fact, and so we see it there. We see Christ in the very center of the center dome, looking down with the 12 apostles around him. And there we are on the outside looking up. From there, when we were there, we went up to Hazor. And Hazor, we just spoke about it in the last class. And the fact you look at down, you see the Sea of Galilee, and right above the top of it, you see Capernaum, and straight up the straight line, the very center under the H-A-Z, you will see there's Hazor is where he's located at. It's not a far distance. It's actually, you can actually walk it, but it gives you an idea of where this is. And I need to get okay. And Hazor there is a facility there that's that, and this just gives you the capital of the north, the time of the occupational tribes of Israel. So, and Joshua at the time turned back into the locals. This is where we think, we see that's what's one of King Solomon's towns, etc. So there's a lot of archaeological evidence there. We will come back to this when we get to 1 Kings. Because this is one of his towns, and we're going to be getting into that and talking about that. On that, so we will see Hazor over and over again, looking down from above. This is not my picture. This is that fact of taking that picture, looking down the archaeological site there today. The same way we look down and see, this is actually looking down into stables. These are stables. You can tell by the divisions that are there. For the animals, etc., and this is where you would brought your animals, etc. But this is walking into that. We begin to walk in and see the major walls that are there. And to me, this is amazing when you're there. It's over 2,000 years, and these are still the remnants of what was building. And in fact, as far as we know, disciples, Christ, etc., could have been in places like this and walked in the exact places we are. There's an archaeological dig that is taking place there. We were there with other archaeologists and also with Bible scholars and theologians who were there guiding us through the sites, etc., and pointing things out. So you see within the sites, we start seeing the digs area, etc. You start seeing the remnants of walls, etc. They're showing how civilization was. And the buildings, etc., they have. These are the foundational walls, foundational stones that are there. We come into we're going up, and you will see the definition of the walkways, the steps, etc., that were there built thousands of years ago that are still there and still utilized today. It's just the structure itself with the mud brick, et cetera, that may have been taken down, have been lost in time. They built a facility on top to protect much of the archaeological evidence they found within there, and we'll get to show a little bit of that. And this gives you a better idea of the city grid that is there today, the grid how the town was laid out, et cetera, the pathways, et cetera, how people worked and lived on that. Within the site, if you look in there, you see a series of stones down here, et cetera. And we were all looking there and saying, well, what does this all mean, et cetera. It says that this was a place of worship. Now, this is not a place they worship God. This is one of the places they're worshiping Baal and other gods. And these stones are part of the way they laid out and were the places of which they worship too. So you can see as we study, what are we seeing right now as we study? We see the Israelites turning away from God over and over again. We just got finished with Judges, and they think about that and the fact that, every story is the fact they're worshiping, they're getting involved with the Canaanites, they're doing this or they're doing that, they're getting themselves in trouble, they fail, they walk away, they turn away, and we watch the cycle go over and over again. They forgot the Shema. The Shema is to love God of all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And that's what we need to be doing the same way. It's focusing on God, not on what's around us. Focusing on Him and the teachings that have been brought to us through His Son, Jesus Christ our Lord. And that's what we need to focus on, not what society or other people are telling us, etc. It's focusing on the Word, on His words, on what He's calling us to do. Now, we've talked about every place that there is where you build a fortress, etc., that you're going to build a city, there has to be a water source, right? Yep. There has to be a water source. And you don't want the water source outside of town. You don't want it, a half mile or even 50 feet outside the walls of your fort. You want it within the fortress itself. Well, there's a pretty amazing underground water supply there. You see, this is a sign that was telling us we're getting ready to go in to see it. And the fact is, this system was built during the reign of Ahab, king of Israel, in the 9th century. It reached underground water level, thus ensuring water supply, independent of outside sources. There were other sources there. They had to keep digging deeper and deeper to build supplies and provide. And it was, in times of siege, the tunnel was in use until the destruction of Hazor by Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria, in 732. And we will get there in our Bibles, and that point of where we'll understand what exactly is taking place and when he overtook Israel. And hang on a second. So we went in. Hang on, everybody. So here we see an overview looking down into where the water supply is. And this is giving you an idea what it looks like. Looking down, you can see how deep this goes down. It's over 113 steps going down. And we'll see here's the steps that are leading down into the water supply. And I always think about, we've talked about, the women, their responsibility was to go get the water. And they would carry the water jugs up on their shoulder as they would walk down. So they would journey down these steps. And you can see the older steps that are still there. those steps have been covered with plaster. There was actually a covering over top of this. These steps are will be covered with plaster. There's actually a drain line. There's a drain space beside it to keep the steps from the plaster being worn off. So this would have been all white, et cetera, well defined. There probably been color, a painting of those things up and down it. So you can get an idea. This flight of steps from the water pool all the way to the top. It's, chalky plaster is placed upon it. And they can see the remnants of that. We get down the very bottom of the water system. It's a large space at the very bottom. It's just looks like a large cistern space. It's like a large cave that is there at the bottom, and the water source. You see the remnants of the water, and it's still there today. And that's where they would walk all the way down these steps to that. It's also a place of protection. You can see all looking up the steps that are there. Would have been a place of protection during the times of sieges, etc., where they put the women and children down in this area. It's also, I think, also if you're there. The days we were there, 125 degrees. To go down this space, you're dropping down into 60 degrees. It's very like walking into air-conditioned space. Outside of it, we come back up and we start seeing more of the remnants of other buildings that were there. And again, we see olive presses for you to see. This is an olive press. This is a press versus the one that grinds. This is pressing down the olives, pulling, getting the oil out. So you always have to do that. Every household is going to be storing up olives and olive oil for use within that. And here's the remnants of these are breadstones. We call a breadstone, the ones on the left, on your left. Looking at those, that you would take that stone and you would this is the base of a mortar board, and you grind. Your wheat would be on top of that, or you're grinding within this type of mortar space of the fact that you were using that stone to grind and separate and make flour. You would do that. You would also have mortars and pestles in your home, etc., for which you ground and prepared the material. Whatever your food source, you're grinding things you would need to break nuts, etc., to get them prepared so you can use them for that evening's meal. Outside, we see the remnants of, again, another building. This could be possible. Yeah, this could be this. Oh, this is well, we believe in these areas, in the fact this would have been also the center would be covered, etc. And this is where you'd have your market area where you'd have shops, etc., trading taking back and forth. Hazor again is on the Via Maris. It's on the trade route, so there'll be trading taking back and forth of bringing goods, etc., and wares to be sold or traded for. And again, you see all that space that is there and how big these buildings are. When you think about that, we're just seeing the remnants and the base of the foundational spaces, etc. We're not seeing the whole, what the whole structure would have looked like. And that's what the archaeologists are beginning to understand more and more of how this were covered, etc. That was, and the fact and how the people would live in these spaces. We went on from there to a small city in the Golan Heights across the water, and it's Katsarin or Quatzarson. It was one of the villages established in the time of Christ, and they believe when you're there, they bring you there because they truly believe that is probably one of the chances that Jesus visited the synagogue there. He would have gone from synagogue to synagogue, space throughout this. These are all walking distances, half day, full day, how many hours, et cetera, to walk from one little village to the next. And the fact, trading posts, et cetera. And Christ is going from place to place with the disciples and sharing the message. What he shares in the Sermon on the Mount, there we think of the Mount of Beatitudes, that sermon would have been broken up in different pieces, and we're going to actually study here in church. We're going to break it down into 4 parts and look at it during the sermon, before I go on my sabbatical. I'm going to be sharing a sermon series on it, because I want you to think about it. This is the stories that Jesus is telling over and over, community to community, to bring them the message of God and the fact that what's taking place. So we walk within this community. There we see this beginning. You see the remnants of another synagogue, etc. And everything is, the synagogue is the very center in the community, just as we think of the church in our communities becomes the center of our community. You walk in, and one thing that was pointed out to us, and we over and over time where we place them, and archaeologists all over the world beginning to understand that, is the fact we see this archway, and you see the filigree up in the top, the wreath, etc. Time of Christ, the time this was in use, that will most likely have been painted. If you know of throughout the world, we're beginning to understand that many of these buildings were painted in the times of Roman and Greek times to bring out, it's not just white marble. There was actually great thought put into them and how they're done. We see the remnants of the columns that are still there, and because there will be a roof over top of this. So imagine you were there at the time 2,000 years ago, walking these spaces, fully finished. The paint there, the walls plastered, the ground is, the floors. The floors are beautiful marble or terrazzo or etc. You're walking among all that, etc. Within that site, we went to the home where they have sort of reconstructed what a home would look like, and there in this home, many times in many communities the fireplace is outside, but this one has the cooking space within the home. And if you see within the cooking area, et cetera, the fire pit, et cetera, is right there. The little thing at the bottom there looks like is called a taboom. A taboom is what you cooked in. You would hot coals, et cetera. It would heat up. You could put things like they have a pot up on top. It would heat up and cook. If you had stew or whatever else, you would eat with that. But inside the taboom, we think of naan bread. That would get so hot in there that you would have ground your wheat, etc. And of course, naan does not have yeast in it. Now there is yeast at the time of Christ because we know they had beer and those things the same way. But this naan is a typical bread, typically used within almost all households, even here today. So, and the fact you take it, and you take the dough and you slap it up on the inside of the taboom, and that's where it cooks. That's why when you buy naan in the store, you will see the little browning on the outside, the little places, and that's typically where it will be stuck on the inside of the wall of a taboom. Of course, commercially, they don't usually have a taboom. They cook it in. But you're seeing remnants of things that are there. You can see the white powdery on the walls, and that is remnants of the plastering that was there 2,000 years ago, or 2,000 or 3,000 years ago. So the walls would have been plastered, and the floors have been plastered. So those of the household, you'd have brooms, etc., kept your space clean, etc. You would, we see it it's like walking into a home today with the plasterboard unfinished, not painted, trim not there, etc. And then we're trying to imagine what they look like, or walking into a home today without the plasterboard and saying, well, here we see the studs, etc. And we're trying to imagine what it looked like in their time. But we're not able, it's a struggle to see just beyond, we think, just the rock. But if you put plaster on that, it changes the whole demeanor of the space, the whole space below it. But again, you see some of the material, they had the color within the cloths that are there, the pots that they used. They had baskets, etc. It always amazes me we're there. Everything's dusty, but it's not. But they were very quickly to tell us, no, this is not what you have seen. They would have things hung up, the rope and tying, making shelves. They had places to sleep, all within those. And also, the thing we found, this is the upper sleeping area. You see the rug that's there, and the wood roof that's over top that would covered it. You'd have your ladder that goes up to it, etc. And the fact, that would have been a sleeping area. Again, when we're out there, we're there, and it's 100, 110, 120, 125 degrees, and you come into these spaces, and they're cool. They're not, you're outside from the heat. You're into a cool space. Outside again, we start seeing, here's another olive press, the big stone. In fact, there would have been most likely a donkey that would have been tied to that, and or it could have been men that would have pushed that around to grind the olives. There's another olive press that's there, and this one's done out of wood. They would have cranked that down to press the olive oil out of the olives. So it's pretty amazing when you start seeing that. One thing and I always stress when we study the Bible, etc., we talk about John the Baptist. And what did John the Baptist eat? Locusts and honey, right? Well, guess what? This is locusts. They call it St. John's bread. It's to understand the locust on which that we think of John ate locusts and honey. Well, if you were in the wilderness, how many grasshoppers do you have to capture to even supply yourself? We're acting like there's just millions of them laying, and you just grab scoops of them up. Well, this locust bush is these pods are all these trees are everywhere, and they're a little bit bitter. What we understand, I didn't try one, but locust and wild honey, these are very edible. You would cook them, etc. And the fact, so this is what we think of locusts, that John the Baptist is that. We went there to go and see a 6th century synagogue. It's on the foot of the slopes of Gilboa Mountain, near Bet Shean. It's Bet Alpha, it's a synagogue. And we were brought there for the one thing, going there and seeing the floor that they do, the mosaics they had. Many of the mosaics we see in the buildings, etc., they're using the mosaics to teach, just like we think of, if you've gone to the Catholic Church, you see all the murals, the statues, etc., and they're teaching. They might have the 12 stations of the cross and all the different statues to represent different things. Sometimes in churches some churches have, pictures and walls. I know out in our atrium we have a picture of the Last Supper. We use that to teach with. In fact, and they use that with way of teaching, etc. And to give you an idea, we look at that. You see with this very diagram at the bottom. I jump it. This is a little bit better picture of it, looking at that. But we jump down here, the real clear picture of this, taken by with proper lighting, etc., to bring it out. It's a mosaic of Abraham and Isaac's story. Of thinking of the fact here's the ram caught in the thicket. There's Abraham going to sacrifice Isaac, etc. All those things are being taken place of carrying the donkey of his servant and bringing their left at the bottom. They would have used that to teach their children. Remember, we think of the Shema as not just to love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, but they are challenged to teach their children, who God is and where all those things. So we're called to teach our children on that. So here's another picture of the floor, and here's another more professional photograph of when we see that the Jewish calendar of when you have what takes place, what time of the year, etc. So on that, we went on to a place called Bet Shean, and it was an amazing place. On that site, we see Canaanite temples that predate the Egyptian occupation of the region, followed by Israelites ruled and the Philistines during the Old Testament period. We will see this place in the Bible several times when we get into the kings and the Samuel, etc. King Saul and his sons King Saul and his sons will be hung from the city walls in this city. This is Roman and Greek architecture was in that. You see that major walkway within it. That's like city center. That's Main Street right there. The columns on each side. The shops will be on each side of that. You would have that's like going downtown, like going downtown Gloucester, except you would have all the architecture and the covering, etc. Because the heat of the day a place that you were going to trade, etc., and shop in that. Underneath that, we'll get into that. The underneath of that pathway, there is running water within the city that comes in from the aqueducts, and there's also a sewer system down below underneath it taking waste away. So that was a pretty amazing thing to think of, to imagine what they had. We see a dusty time. It always makes me laugh sometimes when I see how we portray those of the time of Christ. That we think of that they had so much that we don't even understand, and we're trying to be more and more. We try to understand more and more every day. But we see within the facility, we got to walk among this, and we're just blown away by here's the pillars and the columns and the filigrees on top of these are the broken pieces. There was an earthquake to cause this to all break, and But we went into a bathhouse, and every major community would have a bathhouse. And it's very common in the Roman and Byzantine cities that here this had a number of numerous bathhouses, which the example this was 8,500 square meters. It's a big bathhouse. As it says, it's the smaller of the two discovered in the town center. There's more than one. These are big spaces. So this one was built in the 4th century. And we used for over 200 years. So we want walking, you see in the remnants of it, this is the covering that put over top of it to keep protecting the remnants of what is there. And as we walk in, you're seeing some of my classmates, et cetera, walking in to go into the spaces. We come in an area that we see these pillars standing up, and you have to wonder what those were. They had a floor laid on top of that. If you look at those squares, those square corners, et cetera, and the shaft pathways in here, on the outside of the building, there are fire pits and billows where the fact that they would burn, the servants or the slaves would have built fires, et cetera, and they would blown the hot air, that heat into the building under the floor to heat the floor. So you're going to go into a heated floor. You would arrive in the building, you went into the changing room on the heated floor, et cetera, and where you left your clothes. You're going to take all your clothes off, and there is no bathing suits, there is no swim caps or anything that way. That's how you're getting yourself ready to go into the bathhouse. And there's a whole process you go through. You arrive in. Kim and I go to YMCA for water aerobics. So we go in and we go to the changing room and we get we don't have our bathing suit on already. You put it on and we go out to the pool. Well, we have lockers where we are. They didn't have lockers. They had shelves to put your clothes up on. And you would arrive there and you would go into the work area, and where you would work up a nice lather away from the baths. Because if you're going to go, it may have been a month. It may, however much time it's been. The Egyptians were bathed and cleaned every day, but when was the last time you took the bath, et cetera? You want to get everything out of you. You didn't have soap in the way we think of it, so they would go and work out. They would work out some sort of exercise, wrestling, weightlifting, et cetera. Our Puritan forefathers put bathing suits on them. And then you went into the hot room, the cauldron, without lifting a finger. That cauldron would have been hot water. Again, they're building fires on the outside, making that boiling water. There's fires underneath it, et cetera, bringing it to boil. And so you're in there, you're sweating. All this is sweating there. Now, you didn't have soap, so you would rub olive oil on your body, et cetera. And you use a stick to scrape it off because of striggle. Now, you would have done that, or you may have had a servant, a slave, et cetera, a young boy on the men's side, and a young girl on the other side, women's side, who would have been the one to scrape that off of you. Depends on what you had, but you're going to scrape, and that's taking off your dead skin and all those things you think about. And this is partly, when we get into the New Testament, we'll talk about that. This is one of the things Paul is talking about the behavior of some of the men in there taking advantage of the young men, and he's saying not to do that anymore. Stop that, even though it is an acceptable practice to take advantage of these young men. After all that, you went to the steam room, again the hot room, and you relaxed in the warm pool of water, the warm room. And that's just, I think, even when we go to the YMCA, the water's not heated. Wish it was, but this water is heated. So you're there in that warm room, and the fact that you're sweating and all this is coming out of you. You may get it in the water, etc. And finally, you would go into the plunge baths, the cold plunge, or swimming pools for a nice dip to close the pores, while we relaxing while we are by the poolside. So again, I think if you watch HGTV, et cetera, they're putting, we got to put a cold plunge in. It's like it's something new. But the cold plunge has been around. Here you're seeing here in the 4th century, here's a cold plunge within the building itself. And they would have been earlier times the same way. Again, this is the floor. You see the pillars in the background. This is the floor, what would have been on top of the stones that are placed upon the ceiling between them. Of the warm floor, the warm air is being pumped underneath it to keep these floors warm. We get into, we're back on Main Street, etc. You see the space on the left. There's more space on the right, the same way. And they believe on these spaces there's little niches on each side here where you would have trade booths, etc. And middle of Main Street, etc. You can see that middle set of stones in the center there. Well, that's covering up the sewer system that's underneath it. That these stones would allow them to pull them back out to go clean in there or find a problem, etc., to repair. But that is leading down to the very far end, and there's water running through it, taking the waste away. Again, the beautiful stonework that is there just amazes. That all done by hand, using pounders, which I have a pounder up here, and metal and iron or bronze tools to chip away and that. And they also use these different kinds of rocks to cut with, etc. So we see here the huge columns that are still on there. And this is looking down underneath, down into the sewer area where the sewage is going down into this space down in here, and it goes on down and back. And our people that were there teaching us and walking through it, you had servants down there, slaves, and they're working to clean this, keep this cleaned out, keep it flowing, etc. all the time. We think that is of our sewer workers today, but they don't have to work in this kind of environment. You see arches, etc., the things that the beauty of the architecture are built. This is another public, and then we went to an area called a public latrine. They had public bathrooms. Does anybody imagine that they had public? You're in the city, and I gotta go. Let me run outside of town and find a bush. No, head over to the latrine. Go to the bathhouse. Go to the bathroom. We have a bathhouse. We have a restroom over there. Where's the restrooms at? You look down and you see here's the restroom. Here's the seats you sit upon. Here we are. That Mike is my best friend from seminary. He's there sitting in there in the city on that. On the right is David Hodges. He's one of our professors of Bible study, and on the left is the father of one of my other seminaries who came with us. But you would have sat down and used the restroom. Underneath is the pathway below, water been flowing around, and that would have pulled the waste out. On that, so I apologize. I keep turning my thing. Here we are. And from there, so you're seeing that those places being there, and hang on one second. We'll get to the next slide. We went from out there to walking into the amphitheaters. There was another large amphitheater there. I mean, and you can imagine these seats would have been filled. It's not, we go to churches today and we have, most of our churches are not packed. In fact, if you can imagine, this would have been packed for the people of the city coming to listen, to hear, to talk about, to learn the latest news, to watch a play, to hear a philosopher talk, etc. The culture that's going on, to go hear someone play or someone sing, etc. A play going on, etc. You would have gone into this area. The amphitheaters, this is a stage area, etc. You just begin to look at. You look up on the walls, etc. We're down in the stage area. And if you went up and sat in the top row, and we're down at the bottom, this amphitheater had space underneath it where they could do water. That was one of the amazing things. They could actually have water. They could do little water battles, etc. And that's how they would all kinds of things they could stage and play. But you could sit in the top row, and you could hear everything at the bottom without a microphone. You could whisper at the bottom, and you could hear at the top. And of course, you see the exits out. It's like being in a stadium. I guess, you go out there, and I guess it'd be on the outside, it'd be the hot dog stands. However the food stands, et cetera, there would be after people selling and marketing those things. But we're just sitting here looking and seeing all this space and what was built there, et cetera. They're trying to slowly put it back together because so you see all the stones laid out in the back, et cetera. They're trying to reconstruct over time all this space. Again, you can see all that, and the cut up on the right, up the side of the hill, is the water source. The water is where the water's coming in from. So that's coming into the city. So these are the bases, et cetera, of the temples, et cetera, that would have been there. The buildings, et cetera. These are what's remaining of the foundational space. Within there, we found buildings, et cetera, that had this is a Crusader's cross. That during the time of the Crusades, et cetera, they would have came in there and made places of worship, et cetera. So there's still some signs of the time of the Crusades of the Christian crosses being painted into the buildings and the places, et cetera, where the Crusaders would have been. We're going to wrap up with the fact that we're leaving that space. We went up to a place called Belvoir Castle. It's time of the Crusades, and you can see the oversight of this. This is up on a hill. And the fact, so it's 20 kilometers south of the Sea of Galilee. So 24, 25 miles. No, less than that. I'm reading it the wrong way. So 20 kilometers outside the Sea of Galilee, so it's less than 20 miles. And it's a castle built from the 12th century at the time of the Crusades. So there are remnants of the Crusader castle still there. On that, it sits high above the Jordan Valley. It's a very strategic location, and it was designed to ward off the Muslim invaders that we talk about. You see there, and you can see up in the top, looking out over the valley, et cetera. So we're looking down with these olive trees, et cetera, and you're looking down in that valley below. And around it, there's a moat. You see the remnants of the moat that went around. There would have been water in that, et cetera, or whatever they would have had in those spaces. On that, you see that moat that goes all the way around. It may not have water, but it's also just the fact that indention there, you could not just quickly run in and you had to go down in and come up. So you would have been very, very vulnerable to being, boiling oil and all those different things they would have done. And you see this black basalt rock that they're using in the archways, et cetera, that was all built to make this fort or castle, because Europeans, and we call it, everything had to be a castle. But you can see in there, you can see straight ahead in that, you can see the little slit is an area which the archers would have been able to fire arrows out into. And you can see the spaces looking out on the larger area. And so much of it is still there. Well, in the last attack that took place on this, when the Crusaders lost, finally they had been holed up in this castle for a year and a half under the Muslims attacking them before they finally overcame and took control. So that's what we see. And so you're seeing the spaces, and they're looking out on that. So looking down in the valley. We arrived in Jerusalem. I don't think I'll get through that. And you see, this is the Appian Way. They think of where Jesus walked. This is part of where they think of the places that Jesus walked, carried the cross. We come into there, and we see that we come to the Wailing Wall. This is on the base of the wall, looking up towards the Temple Mount. It is a very holy space today because the Temple Mount is now occupied by the Blue Mosque. In fact, so we're looking at, you're seeing within there, looking down from another wall down towards, this is down looking down in. So we're going into this. We see the city of Jerusalem. And you see this is the Temple Mount up on top. This is the space in which we would have seen King David's, Solomon built his temple, and the second temple be built. In the 70 A.D., after Jesus' death, the Jewish rebellion, the Romans are going to take it and destroy the temple and break it into pieces and just spread it out so it can never be rebuilt. And that's what we're still at that point. It's never been rebuilt. We're coming to the outside, looking up into there's different gates going into the city. And actually this gate is the western gate, the Hulda gate. And this is all closed off, etc. So it gives you an idea. It's the second temple period as it doubled as a gate. It was on that. So we walk in here. We know this gate at one time would have been open all the way up to the Temple Mount. And this is a place that we know Jesus would have entered into Jerusalem through this gate up there or exited through. The steps that he would have walked on, etc. There are actually niches within these steps of places in which there are little places where you have water in which you would, someone coming to the temple would kneel down, etc., and baptize, basically wash themselves clean in the form of baptism in Jewish tradition, anointing themselves to wash their sins away as they entered in. So we see that, the pieces of that. Here's chubby me standing there, my half-shaved face. If you're on the Temple Mount and you look from the Temple Mount away from the city and look to your west, I think, you will see the Garden of Gethsemane. And we all know what took place in the Garden of Gethsemane. It's the Basilica of Agony is built there in 1924. That's what we'll see a little bit of. We come into it as the Olive Garden, the olive groves. All these olive trees are 400 or 600 to 800 years old. Pretty amazing how old these trees are. So that's what we were there, thinking that this is a place, that there have been trees just like this in the time of Christ where he would come and pray. Amazing place to be. And this is why if you ever have an opportunity to go to Israel, it begins to change you to how you look at, as you interpret the Bible, begin to see within your eye the places you have gone. And that's why I want to give you some of these places to see. And I want you to imagine what the architecture, the beauty of the things that were there, in different times as we come upon it. The fact the Canaanite kings, the temples they built, etc., the Assyrians, the Romans, the Greeks will come in the 3rd century before Christ, and they will think Alexander the Great, and the Romans follow after that. So the fact that the Assyrians before, so it's one conquering the other, and the architecture is very similar. What they're bringing in people from different places. This is the basilica that was built there, we read about before, and you go in, there's space. And they think of this as the space, the stones in which Jesus came and kneeled and prayed. No one knows for sure. St. Sophia was the one who came and met with the locals, etc., trying to find and locate the places where Jesus was and where the different places in the Bibles took place. So this would have been brought down by folklore from one to the other, word of mouth, of saying this is the place that this took. The beauty of the flowers there are just unbelievable. Secondary corridor remains of the stone paved street known as this is one of Jerusalem's main thoroughfares in the Byzantine period. So we start seeing there, we see how the main streets that are there, again back at the Wailing Wall, that back up on top of seeing the Blue Mosque, and here it is on the outside. You can see the geometry of there. They're not allowed in Muslim tradition. You cannot. They use geometric. They do not use. There's no imagery of anybody allowed. This is looking up within the inside of looking up into that and seeing the dome, looking down into these are the pathways, what used to have been into the other exits going out, which are now closed. And we came into that. We walk out into the city streets, etc., into Jerusalem, and we begin coming into other places that are of biblical importance. For here is the Basin of Nord. So what you'll learn more about as we get there on the fact, and so we'll see the Basilica, the Byzantine Basilica, we'll see the Crusaders Basilica, that are all these things that are there that we think about. This is the Crusaders Basilica that was built. You can see all the buttresses and the arches that are very common in that time frame. The stonework that was done, it's just a beautiful stonework of how this was all laid. You're thinking this is 1,500 years old. Out in the street, et cetera, you start seeing the grooves in the pavement, et cetera, with the grooves, the rock walkways, et cetera. You could not, if it was just flat rock, you would slip on everything if it rained, et cetera. So the tradition since the beginning is they cut these grooves into that to give a place to grip your feet, et cetera, on that. The grooving there's grooving in these walkways, et cetera, at the time. We could see in some of the places where the chariots had gone through, or the carts, et cetera, which are based upon the same wheel distance of that. We went into another, and forgive me, this is the oldest sect of Christianity. They're the African descent, and my brain just went poof. But we went there, Coptic Christians, and the humility within this space of the priest that we met it sort of recenters yourself of who they are and what we're supposed to be the servants we're called to be. Very simplistic in architecture. Within there, the iconography is there. The fact of images of Christ. We see one of the priests he's holding up. This is the gospel. I forget which God. I think it was the Gospel of Mark he was holding up. Sharing what they would have read from that in the shape of a cross. And you see within the architecture, very similar to the Greek Orthodox. In fact, the iconography is there. We went from there to the Church of Holy Sepulchre, and that's where we're going to end up tonight. We're a little bit over with this. The Church of Holy Sepulchre was originally outside the walls of Jerusalem. If you don't know what that church is, within this church is where Christ was crucified and buried, where he was put on the cross on Golgotha. Golgotha is in the upper part of the church. It's up on the higher end of it. That this church would have been outside of the Jerusalem walls, but like any growing community, over time, thousands, they moved the walls outside to cover where the church brought the church within the walls. So we see that there we see the crucifixion of Christ, etc. And within the spaces, we would see that the spaces of the remembrance of a place to worship, to do that. In the center of the lower part, we begin to see where the tomb was. This is up on the upper where we think of this is where they think this is up on the hill of Golgotha, which has all been built over and beautified and everything else. But you can see when you get up close to it, you can see the remnants of the hill, etc., and where they would have crucified Christ on that. He would have been taken down from the cross, and remember, he was brought to the tomb of another, of a place of that, and this is going down into the tomb area, which is it's not just 5 feet, it's down. You're going down off the top of the hill, down a little bit of space within the thing, walking down into this area where the tomb is, and this is they have beautified all this the same way, etc. Within there, and you don't have a real good picture of it. There is a piece of what they think is the stone that was rolled away. It's a big round stone. It's not the full piece, but they think it's the remnant of what was there that had been broken. And so that's where we'll end. In fact, it says to understand where you are, as you read, I want some of this stuff to stick in your mind, and to think of how they lived, and the mortars and pestles, the stonework. I will keep these kind of things here for the next week or so. We'll use them as ways of talking about. There's pieces of pottery here that are over 2,000 years old. You can run your fingers along the grooves where the potter had made the lip on that. Just imagine what it is as a bottle stopper. There's a pounder. A pounder is a stone that you use that was very common not only in a household, but a house of that. There's some chert. The chert is what they make knives, etc., and they sharpen the tools that they use, the mosaic pieces, etc. And you start seeing what we cannot imagine, we see from our eyes, but I want you to see the world around them was a very beautiful space of the things they had and how they would built and created. When they built their tents, etc., the carpets they would have within their nomadic community, etc., is still the same traditions that would have been at the time of Abraham, the time of Joshua, the time of all that when King Saul, when King David, etc. We don't see the artwork and the beautiful rugs and the basketry and the cloth that was used, the colors that were there. It wasn't a dry and dusty place. There were people that lived in caves, etc., but they could plaster the floors and use natural dyes, etc., to create a paint to bring color into that. The women wore their clothing, etc. They would have, there was fine in trade routes, etc. You could get a better quality of cloth, etc. that was traded back and forth. And they would trade wool for this or that. So all those things that are there. So that's what I want you to begin to see as we go deeper, is to begin to imagine what this community looks like around you. Let's come to the Lord in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we just ask you to watch over us and continue in this journey as we begin to open the book of Ruth and we continue on. Lord, let us hear and understand what you have been doing since the beginning, calling us. And the struggles of the Israelites not hearing you. They hear you, but then they walk away. And Lord, guide us. Guide us to a better understanding of what you call us to do, to live the way you call us to be. In the image of your Son, Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Good night all. I'll see you next week as we open up the book of Ruth. God bless.